Hello, everybody. This is Vince Russo, and here in Indiana, I'm still in a cabin in the woods. It is roughly about 9 o'clock in the morning on Tuesday. If you're listening to this on the Realm Network or watching it on the Realm Network, you will see this today. If you're listening on Podcast One, you will hear this show tomorrow. This show is a little ditty called That's Life. And this is a show where I actually do try not to discuss wrestling. I try to talk about life, but sometimes wrestling sneaks through the cracks. And I want to say a couple things about this show. The most feedback I get from any show throughout the entire week is this show. And I'll tell you why, because in this show, I take my life, my 56 years on this planet, my trials, my tribulations, my climbing to the top of the mountain, my falling to the bottom of the pit, and I try to relate some of it to your life, what I learned, what I know, because the older we get, the wiser we get. And I was a little concerned with this show at the beginning because, listen, I'm Vince Russo. Everybody wants to hear Vince Russo talk about wrestling. That's what Vince Russo is known for. And Vince Russo was also in an industry that for many, many years was all about ratings. So every time I would do a show other than wrestling, I would see the Podcast One numbers go down, and that frightened me. Because I don't want to lose my Podcast One gig. I can't afford to lose my Podcast One gig, to be honest with you. It pays my bills. So I tried moving away from That's Life. I tried to talk about wrestling for 5 days a week. And let me tell you something. It wasn't enjoyable, but I could have done it. Like, that's not the issue. This is a job. So if I had to talk about wrestling 5 days a week, I could have talked about wrestling, but then I started realizing I've been given this forum, and I feel I've been given this forum, by God to do good with. And I think part of that is spreading his message. And by God, if I can't take one day out of this podcast to talk about the goodnesses of our Lord, then what is the point? Talking about wrestling 5 days a week is not going to change anybody's life. Raw was a good show last night. We will talk about that tomorrow. But that's not going to change anybody's life. But living your life day to day, examining your life, what you learn, what mistakes you make, how do you go forward? What am I supposed to be doing here? Is there a God? These are things that are important. So what I would find out was, yes, this show would draw the lowest ratings because people want to talk about wrestling. But I got the most feedback from this show than any show I ever do. The text messages, the DMs, the emails telling me that this show really struck a nerve with people. And I try to get back to as many as you as I possibly can. And that tells me we need to be talking about this stuff. I don't care if 1 people listen. I don't care if 2 people listen. I don't care if 10 people listen. I don't care if 100,000 people listen. Stuff that's important, and we are going to continue to talk about it today. There's a couple of things weighing very, very, very heavy on my mind that I got to talk about today and that are important for you to hear. So I hope you do. I hope you stick with me. This show may be directed directly at you. That's why I may be doing the show. It may be for one of you out there that I am supposed to reach, and the light bulb's supposed to go off, and you're supposed to say, I get it. So listen up, man. We're going to cover a lot of important things today and important issues. This show is brought to you by Pro Wrestling Loot. Look, without my sponsors, there is no show. It's that simple. They pay the bills of the show. They make this show possible to be free on Podcast One. Pro Wrestling Loot is the monthly pro wrestling mystery box that comes to you monthly, filled with wrestling merchandise. This mystery box comes packed with autographed photos, action figures, t-shirts, and exclusive collectibles that you will not find anywhere else. Sign up now at ProWrestlingLoot.com for just $19.99 monthly with no commitments. You could be one and done. You can get a September box, take October off, go back to November, get a Christmas box in December. Whenever you want, you have that freedom. There's no long-term commitment. And for all of you first-time subscribers that sign up now, you will save an additional 10% off your first month's box using the promo code Russo. So that first box, instead of being $19.99, will be $17.99. If you want the hottest wrestling items spanning through all eras of wrestling, my favorite, as you know, being the Attitude Era and the very early days of WrestleMania, and you want memorabilia, merchandise from legends, Hall of Famers, indie stars, and even Vince Russo. I signed a beautiful photo for Pro Wrestling Loot Mystery Box. So head on over now to ProWrestlingLoot.com, and remember, save 10% off your first box by using the promo code Russo, RUSSO. Again, that's ProWrestlingLoot.com, and their Twitter is @WrestlingLoot. Okay, a couple of things I want to talk about today, mainly two things. Over the weekend, I read that Ric Flair was brought to the hospital. I'm hearing different things. I believe it was Atlanta. Don't quote me on that. It doesn't matter where it was. But I'm heard he was brought to the hospital. It was, routine procedures, nothing to worry about. So okay, cool. Say a little prayer for Rick. It doesn't seem like there's anything to worry about. All of a sudden, this story starts, and now we're being told there is something to worry about. And now I am very, very, very concerned. Listen, man, I know a lot of us don't deal with death well, and people dying, especially people we know, people we care about, and people we love. I cannot deal with death at all. I'm just telling you that. I don't attend funerals. I can't handle that. I was in the room with my mom when she passed away. I was there with her corpse, just me and her. And I said my goodbyes to my mother, and this is last October, and I've got to be honest with you. From that moment on, I've blocked it out of my head. I don't think about my mother passing away because I can't deal with that fact that my mother is no longer here. I don't deal with death well. I don't deal when I hear somebody's got cancer or somebody's got this or somebody's got that. I don't deal with that well. And again, I know many of us don't, but for me, it's a real issue. So, of course, when I start reading that Ric Flair is in grave danger with his health, it's not even a pit I get in my stomach. I don't know, man. I disappear in this emotional abyss, and I'm distraught, and I'm depressed, and I'm upset. And it makes me sick to my stomach. It really, really does. So, I had some car issues yesterday, and I had to bring my car in to get fixed. And the whole time I'm thinking about, Ric Flair, and I'm thinking about, Charlotte, and I'm thinking about, David, and I'm thinking about, Reed, when Reed passed away, how much that affected Rick. And my thoughts were really with Rick. And listen, man, Ric Flair and I were not best friends. We weren't pals. It was nothing like that. But the honest truth is, I really cared about this man. And I'll tell you why in a minute. I'm going to lay out to you my history with Ric Flair and what he means to me. And again, I didn't go up and down the road with Ric Flair, since the 70s. That's no, bro. I was a fan of Ric Flair's. I was absolutely blessed to begin working with him in 1999 at WCW. Then I went to work with him at TNA. But we were never tight. This had nothing to do with being tight. So I'm thinking about Rick all day, and I get a tweet from somebody on social media. And bro, this is what's wrong with social media. This guy didn't mean to do any harm. It was just a mistake. But he said to me, I was just speaking to somebody in the hospital, R.I.P. Ric Flair. And I got to tell you, man, I wanted to vomit. I really just felt like I wanted to vomit. I was ill. You're not even thinking about things like this. And then, on a Saturday, Ric Flair's here. And then somebody's telling you on a Monday he's not. So I'm looking around on my phone trying to get this confirmed on Monday. And thank God there was no confirmation. So this person got his facts wrong and incorrect. And, that's okay, bro. It's like, thank God Ric Flair is still alive. Then I'm reading he's being put into a medically induced coma. He had surgery. I guess he came out of the surgery, which is huge. Charlotte posted something, so, he's fighting through. And there are a lot of things I want to say about Ric Flair, and there are a lot of things I want to say about life and death in general. When I left the WWE to go to WCW in 1999, here's the one thing that kept sticking with me. And here's the one thing I was most concerned about. I was going to work with the two biggest icons in the wrestling industry. I was going to work with Hulk Hogan and Ric Flair. And I was very, very concerned about that. And I'll tell you why. These guys were larger than life. These are two guys that paved the way for me to have a career in the wrestling business. And more than anything else, I wanted to be accepted by these guys. I wanted to be liked by these guys. That was very important to me. Me earning their respect wasn't even on my radar. I wasn't looking to earn their respect. I was just kind of looking for them to like me as a human being. And I knew that was going to be tough in the wrestling business because all they knew about me are things that they heard about me. And let's face it, bro. If people are talking to Vince Russo to Ric Flair and Hulk Hogan, it's probably the people that don't like me. I also knew Ric Flair was very tight with Jim Cornette, and you know how Jim Cornette feels about me. So, I'm sure Ric Flair got an earful of that. But I just wanted these guys to know I'm an all right guy, bro. And I'm a fan, and I'm a family man, and I got a job to do here, and I treasure you guys. And without you guys, I would have never had an opportunity to work in the wrestling business. Bro, growing up in New York, let's just call a spade a spade. When you grow up in New York and you listen to people in the South, especially people in the South with that Southern accent, especially when you're a kid, so you think that people in the South are just not cool. You hear the accent and you just don't think they're cool. And like I said, you're a kid, you're a teenager, you don't know. The West is different. Your cowboys are different. Your cowboys are rugged. Your cowboys will kick ass. But when guys with that Southern accent. You just as a New Yorker, you don't think that's cool. And, you know, at the time, I'll never forget, I was a WWF fan. And all of a sudden, like, it had to be a UHF channel, obviously. I come across this Wrestling from the Sunshine State with Gordon Soley. So because I was a regular wrestling fan, I said, let me watch this. But again, it was from the Sunshine State. So, you know, there's going to be a lot of Southern guys from here. And I don't think I'm going to be a fan of this. Okay. Well, I was wrong. And I was wrong because of one guy. And I can remember this as it was yesterday. I can remember the bleach blonde hair, the scars on the forehead, the sunglasses and the suits. And what I remember most is when he used to start cutting those promos, Ric Flair, and the suit started coming off piece by piece, the jacket, the tie, the shirt. He'd be half naked. He dropped the elbow on his suit. Oh, my God, was I mesmerized by this guy. This guy is unfreaking believable. I don't care if he's from Florida, Charlotte, Mississippi. I could care less. This is the coolest guy I think I've ever seen. And that was my introduction to Ric Flair. I started in the wrestling business right before Ric Flair won that Royal Rumble in 1992. I started the tail end of 1991. That's when I first met Cactus Jack, who wasn't in WCW yet, hadn't made a name for himself. That year, January of 1992, Ric Flair went to the WWE, won the Royal Rumble. I loved Flair. Who didn't want to? 1999, and I'm very consumed with the fear and the unknown of having to work with Hogan and Flair. And I'm going to add something to that. Literally a week before I showed up at WCW, maybe a couple of weeks, I don't know. Because one of these dirt sheet writers is going to listen to this and say, oh, Russo's lying. It wasn't a week before. It was 3 weeks before. Whatever. Before I started in WCW, and Ric Flair main evented Nitro. Now, keep in mind, both of these guys were already into their 50s. They did not look the best they looked. They looked like 50-year-old men, and they looked as good as 50-year-old men can look. Let me put it to you that way, but they were still 50. WCW, of course, let the match go on too long. And the longer it went on, the more they were exposed, the slower they were. And in my mind, I'm thinking of Flair and Hogan in their prime and how great the both of them were. And I'm just saying to myself, why is WCW? Are they not seeing what I'm seeing? They are not protecting these two treasures. These guys need to be protected. They still need to headline the show. They still need their spots on top. Nobody was ever going to touch them. But they had to be protected. And they had to be put in the proper roles. And maybe that proper role wasn't main eventing Nitro well into their 50s. So the first thing I wanted to do, CW, was get Hulk and Flair off the roster. Put them on the sideline and build up a spot. Earn them in a glorified role that would best suit them at this point in their careers. That was my game plan. That's why I did the thing with Hogan and Sting at Bash at the Beach, or Halloween Havoc. And that's why Ric Flair was beat up in the desert by the Filthy Animals. I wanted them off TV. I wanted to set the table for them and bring them back in less of a full-time wrestling. But of course, with the paranoia of professional wrestling, I don't think both Hogan and Flair understood that. You know, Hogan's been known to say, oh, when Russo came into WCW, he made it clear that if you were over 40, he was getting rid of you, which was complete nonsense, which was absolutely ridiculous. So I've worked with so many guys who are more over at 40 than they were at 30. I wanted to repackage these guys. I wanted them to be treated like the legends that they were. And I don't think Flair understood either. And I think these guys were afraid that I was kicking them to the curb. I was going to move the young guys into their spots. That's not what I was doing at all. Guys, listen, man, I made a bonus on ratings. And Ric Flair always were and always will be ratings. For me not to put them on our show would have personally and directly hurt my pocketbook to begin with. So it would have made no sense for me. That was not the plan. But like I said, bro, is built on paranoia. So 3 months in at WCW, they tell me things aren't working out for them. You know what? They're really not working out for me either. So I go home. 3 months later, I come back. I cut a promo that first show back in Denver, Colorado, and Ric Flair, subject of that promo. And part of it was shoot because I knew Ric Flair and Hulk Hogan had a lot to do at home for 3 months. And you got to understand something, bro. I left a good situation at the WWE, a good working situation. Moved my family to Atlanta. My kids were very young. 3 months in, I was in no man's land, and I knew Hogan and Flair had a lot to do with that. So when I cut that promo on Flair, there was a lot of it that was a half shoot. Mad at him at the time. But I also knew that with that promo, I was going to give Rick his comeuppance. And, you know, Rick was going to get over on Vince Russo. I knew that going in. I was setting myself up as the heel, even though that first promo was to get a little steam out. Then Ric Flair and I got into a program. And his son David was involved in that program. Reed was involved in that program. Charlotte, to some extent, was involved in the program. The whole Flair family was involved in the program. I think Rick enjoyed that. I think he liked the fact that the whole family was involved. You know, Reed was a great wrestler at the time, you know, as a kid. I'm sure Charlotte at that point wanted to get into wrestling. David was struggling, and man, you know, out of respect for David and not David, out of respect for Rick and the way I really personally felt about David Flair, I purposely gave David so much TV time because I wanted to get him over. I understood, man, living in the shadows of your father, the icon. How can you ever live up to those expectations, bro? I can't imagine what that kid was going through. So I really championed David and did everything I could do to give David a fair shot. And Rick, at that time, was doing everything he could do to give David a shot. And I'll tell you, I think Rick was into the angle. And I think he was in it enough when he came to me one day and he actually I shave his head. I thought it was a rib. And I said, Rick, are you out of your freaking mind? I literally said as a mark, you're the freaking nature boy, bro. You're the nature boy. I can't shave your head. But Rick insisted because he wanted to get the angle over. That a nobody like Vince Russo of a freaking legend. That's ridiculous, bro. And then I'll never forget we had an upcoming match at the Phillips Arena in Atlanta. Ric Flair country. And him and I were going to have a steel cage match. And I was a freaking novice, bro. You know, I took some bumps at Johnny Rodgers' school, but I was a freaking novice. And all I freaking cared about was, you can't make him look bad. You can't make him look bad. You can't make him look bad. This is Ric Flair. You can't make him look bad. That's all I cared about. The last thing I wanted to do was make Ric Flair look bad. And I'll never forget, we met down at the power plant. The cage was set up, and we walked through the match. But this is the thing I'll never forget. Rick walked through the match with me one time. He showed me everything that we were going to do one. I knew he was only telling me one time. So we go to Phillips Arena. We have our match very early on, bro. There's a Russian leg sweep. The novice I am back and spank the back of my head off the mat, and I am concussed. And you can go back and look at the tape on YouTube. I am concussed. I am freaking out of it. And all I know is two things. Ric Flair look bad, and you have to climb to the top of that cage. And I knew I was concussed. But I also knew I cannot make this man look bad. That's all I freaking cared about it. Don't ask me how I got through that match. I don't remember that match. Through. And when I look back at it now, because the storyline was Vince Russo wasn't a wrestler, it really wasn't horrible. I went to bed that night, and I'll never forget when I woke up in the morning, because, you know, the show was in Atlanta, so I went home. I was watching TV downstairs, and I woke up, and the TV was on, and I could not put the picture name of the television. You know, the picture was here. The TV was here. I could not put the picture in the television. I literally pulled myself and crawled myself upstairs using the banister. I couldn't even freaking stand up, and I had to go that day to TV in the Atlanta area. That was the day with Ric Flair when I brought in all those old people, and we were going to have the retirement party for him, and he wound up putting me in the cake. Oof, I'll never forget that. Here's the thing that stands out to me more than anything about Ric Flair. You know, let's face it, bro. I was a fan that became a writer. You know, I never put my blood, sweat, and tears into the wrestling business. I did not go up and down the road 350 days out of the year. The hundreds and hundreds of mile car rides from the family, the loneliness of the road, the bumps, the injuries. And those were the things that I respect wrestlers for, bro. It's a tough life, man. And these guys never sleepwalk through it. And as Rick and I continue to work this angle, regardless of, reports you'll read or who heard this and who heard that. I knew Rick was starting to respect me because I could tell that by asking me to shave his head. Just the way the guy sold for me, just his input into this angle. And I knew it got to a point where he trusted me. I knew it got to a point where he was thankful of what I was doing for David. He was thankful that Reed was on the show. That meant everything to me. Everything. And then WCW dissolves and we find ourselves working together at TNA. And every time I saw Rick, my face would light up like a Christmas tree. It just did, bro. I was that freaking, 14-year-old kid watching him on TV, stripping off that suit and dropping the elbow on it. I was still that guy. And when you're at TNA and you're at Universal Studios and you see that still bleach blonde crop of blonde hair, you know that's Ric Flair, and your face freaking lights up like a Christmas tree. And I used to pop every time I saw him. And he always used to call me Mr. Russo. Mr. Russo, how are you doing? And it's funny that I'm talking about him this way because thank God he's still here and he's still with us. I'm getting the opportunity to say this now. Do you know what it meant to me? I went through a lot of shit with the boys, bro. I went through a lot of politics. I went through a lot of backstabbing, a lot of disrespect, a lot of second guessing, a lot of crap. And I'll be honest with you, I didn't deserve a lot of it, bro, because I was just doing my freaking job. But when the greatest of all time is referring to you as Mr. Russo, everything is right in the freaking world. But, bro, here's something I got to say, man, that will stay with me forever. Bro, there were 2 times that were very special to me in the wrestling business. Actually, well, 3 times. But one I'm still on the fence about. The first time, the first 3 things meant everything to me in the wrestling business. I'm going to tell you what they were. Yeah, bro. The night after Owen Hart passed away. And, bro, I will never forget. I cannot describe to you that day and what I felt and what was just going through my mind and my heart. I can't even describe that to you. Walking around backstage, freaking lost, man. Absolutely lost. And I'll never forget, there was a moment when I was by myself, because you have to take into consideration, you wrote that script. Your pen was on that paper. You wrote that script. Despite the fact that the riggers from WCW were going to be there and they wanted to do something because they wanted to work with us, despite all that you wrote the script. And I'm walking lost backstage. Steve Austin walks up to me, and listen, man, we all know Steve had some issues with Owen. He suffered a major, major, major injury that I don't think he ever got over. So there was really no love lost there. But I'll never forget Steve Austin came up to me when I was freaking lost, man. I was lost. I wanted to quit the business. I was lost. And Steve came up to me and he put his hand on my shoulder and he goes, Vince, it's not your fault, man. It's not your fault. And coming from him at that time, like there's no one else that could have come from me the way he did, but I knew how sincere Steve was. And I'll never forget that about him. Vince McMahon told me he loved me once. And it's so sad to say that should have meant a lot to me because I loved that man. But I didn't know if he was sincere. I didn't know if he was saying it to keep me aboard. And that's sad. That really is sad. I hope he meant it. But here's the third thing, bro. I leave TNA and I'm out of the wrestling business for 5 freaking years. Nobody calls me anymore. The usual suspects call me, bro. Simon, Diamond, Pat Kenny, Disco Inferno. There are people here and there, once in a blue mood, Bubba. But that's how it is, bro. When you can't do anything for anybody in the wrestling business anymore, you're dead to them, bro. It's just the way it is. It's the way it's so sport. It's the way it is. And I'll never forget, man, my whole life, all I wanted to do was be on radio. I never wanted to be a writer in the wrestling business. I never wanted to get into the wrestling business. I got in the wrestling business because I needed a job. And it was a job. And that's why I'm not Mickey Mark, because I always looked at the wrestling business as a job. If I could have done what I really wanted to do, my career would have been very much the way of a Howard Stern. My mentor to this day. And not because of his potty humor, because the guy's a freaking genius. And I got an opportunity to do a iHeart Radio gig in Colorado. That what town? I don't even remember what town. Fort Collins. And I was there on a trial basis, and if the show was successful, we were going to continue on with it. And I knew I had to bring heavy hitters on the show that I had never called in favors to before. I don't like calling in favors, bro. I don't like when I have to ask Kevin Nash to be on my show, when I got to ask Shawn Michaels. I hate when I have to call Austin. I hate calling in favors. And the first favor I called in was Mick Foley. And I knew Mick from way back when. I told you I met Mick in 1991. We're both from Long Island. We worked very closely together. WWE, TNA. I knew Mick would be more than happy to help me out, and he did. But at around the same time, bro, I think I got a call from Conrad Thompson. I think it was Conrad, to do Ric Flair's podcast. Rick was doing a podcast at the time. And of course, bro, Rick bringing me on his podcast. I mean, that in itself is enough. So I'm doing a podcast with Rick. And at the same time, I'm starting my podcast, not my podcast, one show, my iHeartRadio show. And I'm saying to myself, if I could get Ric Flair on iHeartRadio, I could not get a bigger star on the planet. I got to get Ric Flair on the show. And I remember as we're wrapping up the conversation, I don't even want to ask him. But as the conversation is winding up on his show, I say to him, I just blurted out, okay, Rick, now I'm going to put you on the spot. I did your show. I need you to do my show on iHeartRadio. And I'm going to get you to commit to it on the air. And Rick says, sure, without question, I'll definitely do your show. Just tell me when, yada, yada, yada. And we wrapped up his show. Now, guys, I got to tell you, I heard that song and dance 1,000 times of who was going to do what for me. And nobody ever paid it off, or very rarely was it ever paid off. So now I'm saying to myself, okay, he said he'd do it. It would mean the world to me. It could mean me getting a job, but I'm not going to hound the nature boy, bro. I'm not going to hound him. I'm not going to call him and ask him. But an amazing thing happened. I didn't have to call him. About 30 minutes after the interview, I get a call from Ric Flair. And he says, Mr. Russo, when do you want to do your show? I cannot tell you what that meant to me. Friends that I thought I had in the business weren't even friends. Didn't hear from anybody anymore. I could have died and they would have said, oh yeah, Vince Russo, blah, 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 blah. Okay, what's the finish and who's going over? For freaking Ric Flair to call me and make good on his freaking promise when there was absolutely nothing in the world at that point in time I could do for him, literally broke me down. Of all the people I would have ever thought would have come through for me at that time, Ric Flair was not on the top of that list. Within the next couple of days, we did the interview on iHeartRadio. And that was the nicest thing that anybody had ever done for me. Maybe not only just in the wrestling business, but in my entire life. Because there is no way, no how Ric Flair had to do that for Vince Russo. And the effect that had on me, I can promise you, Ric Flair has no idea. No idea. And I'm sure it was little of, but that one thing meant everything to me when I told Rick how important this was for my future here and a job and taking care of my family. He didn't hesitate one iota. You know, Rick is only 68 years old. And it's as I sit here and I talk about life and I talk about what is the meaning of life. And I believe the meaning of life is an ongoing journey. To look at yourself and look at your life experiences and know who you are within God, understand what his will is for you. What are we supposed to be doing on this planet? All our gifts are different. Let me look at my gifts. Let me look at what I bring to the table. Let me align myself with the person who created me, and then I will find my place on this planet. And I do believe, for whatever reason, I was supposed to be writing that Attitude Era, even though, trust me, that work did not glorify God by any means, because God was not in my life at that point. But what it enabled me to do was speak to that audience. And guess what? Much of that audience are the same people I speak to today. So maybe that's where the association with Vince Russo was supposed to come. Through this wrestling company, through this television show. So maybe 20 years after, he could be talking directly to you and sending a message to you that he was destined to send. But the wrestling business began to be an unhappy place, and it became clear to me that I was supposed to move on. So I did what I was supposed to do, but then it was time for me to move on. I can tell you this, bro. At 68 years old, Ric Flair was never supposed to move on from the wrestling business. Ric Flair was created to entertain and put smiles on faces and bring joy to millions and millions and millions of people, men, women, children, strangers he didn't even know, on a weekly basis. That was the role created for him. That's why there will only be one Ric Flair. Nobody can do that. That was his calling, to entertain us, to make everything okay, even though the day, the week, the month, or the year may have sucked. The minute he started tearing off that suit, everything was going to be okay. And the sacrifices he made in his life, my God, I don't even want to know. The marriages, the relationship with his children, being lonely on the road. I don't even want to know, but that's what he was supposed to be doing. What we all need to find. what it is we're supposed to be doing. I don't want to get heavily into this, guys. I really don't. But I'm watching this white nationalist rally in Charlottesville, Virginia. I cannot comprehend how people can hate. I was going to say, I can't comprehend how people can hate to that degree. Quite frankly, I can't comprehend how people can hate at all. Do you really think that we were created to freaking hate? Do you think we were given life to hate? Do you think that's the energy we're supposed to be giving to the rest of the world, is our hatred to other people and other races and other sexes and other creeds and other religions? Do you honestly believe that? And I know we're a victim of our environments. I know when you've got to look into some of these I don't know, protest, whatever you call them, hate mongers. There's a reason why they hate. Something happened in their life where they hate that made them the way they are. But let me tell you something, bro, and I don't care where you are. You got a window of opportunity to blame other people for your shortcomings or your failures. You got a window of freaking opportunity. Once you're an adult and once you put your big boy pants on, then it's on freaking you. There's nobody to blame anymore. You got the free will to make your own choices. Waking up in the morning and saying, I'm going to go out and hate people today. Go see a psychiatrist because something is freaking wrong with you. Because hatred and negativity is not going to make this world a better place for anybody. And I don't care what side you're coming from, bro. We got to step it up, bro. We all have to play our part in making things better. Ric Flair played that part his entire freaking life, bro. He made things a little better. How can you make things better? By taking a tiki torch to the streets and hating other people that aren't like you? This is why we can't sit here and talk about wrestling 5 days a week nonstop. Because there are things happening in the world that we all have a little bit of control over. Change the person next to you. Spread some love. Let it be freaking contagious. With that being said, Ric Flair, we love you, bro. We're all in this with you. The joy you brought to our lives, the joy you brought to my life, just left a bearing on me forever and ever and ever. What you did for me, I want to do for somebody else. And what I do for somebody else, they should want to do for somebody else. Please keep Rick, the family, in your thoughts and in your prayers. Guys, you can make a freaking change. You can make a change in not only other people's lives, you can make a change in your own life. You could be the person that you want, that you were created to be, that you were supposed to be. And I can guarantee you none of that has anything to do with hate. We weren't built to hate. You know, everybody, you know, North Korea now, they got the nuclear warheads. They can reach LA. They can reach Denver. They got the nuclear warheads. What do the nuclear warheads, what do they represent? They represent hate. So when we hate, we represent the same thing. Dropping nuclear warheads on our neighbors, on our own country, on people that are the same of us. It's the same freaking effect. If it's not a bomb killing people, it's words killing people. It's cyberbullying. It's threats. It'd be like this. But all you could do is control you, bro. You got the free will to be whoever you want to be. That's it, man. I'll see you tomorrow.